Alright guys, early Saturday morning, had a heap of requests on the engine installation on the Zenith 750 Cruzer and the modifications I've done. So 16 valve engine, EJ22. So the engine itself is a 160 horsepower engine. It's had modified cams, so it's had a cam grind to give the valves more lift. Everything was crack tested as well before reassembly, just to ensure there was no issues with anything. The plastic cover that usually goes on the back to cover the timing belt on these, I've actually left that off just to allow ease of installation, but also so I can do it when I'm doing a pre-flight check. I can actually see the condition of the timing belt before going for a flight. Right, so first thing I did with this engine, with the intake manifold completely turned around 180 degrees. So this throttle body is an original throttle body, but it's been completely altered with a different arm on it. As you can see, it's a aircraft push-pull cable. The spring purely stops any flutter on the butterfly inside. The adjustment screw on this one, I had to completely close it because I'm running just all set on butterfly, the butterfly inside for idle. The idle air control, which is around here, I had to remove the idle air control just in here. As you can see, there's a plate covering that over. A couple of reasons. One, I don't need it, and two, it would get in the way of the new alternator installation as well. So with crankcase ventilation, it is from down here, it's baffled in the engine, so it comes up over here, around, up into here, into the PCV valve. What this basically does is just a metering device. It removes all the gases out of the crankcase when it's running. Problem you've got with this in the original form is it can't keep up at high RPM. If it gets a slight little bit of oil residue in there, the spring can't keep up with it. So had to modify that, remove the spring, change the size of the orifice slightly. This can only be done if you're running a fully programmable fuel injection system. Otherwise it will play havoc with the computer. This one here is running SDS, fuel injection and ignition, so I can alter all those parameters. So onto the SDS fuel injection system. Absolutely awesome system. I highly recommend it if you're going to use any aftermarket fuel injection. They're actually really good to use and really easy to program. So this is a coil for the SDS fuel injection for your plugs. So the SDS computer basically runs on a map sensor, which I've got mounted here. Sensors manifold pressure. The other sensor it runs on is your throttle position sensor here, which it can run on either one. So you can actually program it so you can run just your throttle position sensor to control your engine. You can have it running on just your map sensor to control the engine. Now if one of these sensors fail, I've programmed it so that it won't affect the engine running. It'll still keep the engine running even if this map sensor fails. And even if this throttle body fails, this sensor, it will actually still run the engine. Really, the throttle position sensor, all this does is for enrichment when you open the throttle quickly. So you program that in the SDS controller. The other sensor that it runs on, I'll try and get a good view of it in here. This is it here, crankshaft sensor. So this controls the ignition timing and everything. It's got 3 magnets that I had to drill in to that pulley, and what it does is that those magnets pick up on that sensor, sends a signal to the computer, and tells the computer where the crankshaft is situated and when to fire. And all that can be controlled in the dash on the SDS controller. So I'll show you that now. So this here is the controller home screen. Push gauge, it shows you, I've got here manifold pressure, RPM, ignition timing, and my O2 readings. So that there is just a default 19.7 to 1. I've programmed it at idle to about 3000 is 12 to 1. From 3000 to 4000 is 11 to 1. And at full power, I actually programmed it to run around that 10.5 to 1, which is a rich mixture. Reason I'm doing that is I don't want to put too much load on the engine just while it's all running in. Keeps the pistons cool, keeps the exhaust valves cool as well, keeps everything running nice. I will burn a little bit more fuel, but it's worth just looking after the engine a little bit. Onto the alternator. It's a 70 amp Denso type alternator with custom mounts. As you can see there, I've had to make a custom adjustment arm down in here. I know it's hard to see. Down in here there's a chromoly alternator mount that I welded up and adapted so that it can one, it's a lot lighter installation. The original had a cast iron adjuster, very heavy, big alternator. This one here is a lot smaller. The other thing I had to change was the oil cap. Original was a lot higher, fouls your cowling, so I had to make up a small cap to undo and top up all your oil from that. I still kept the original dipstick, that is all in the original position. As you can see here, this is all hard fuel lines coming up through here. So the hard fuel line comes up into a fuel filter and then into the flex line and fire jacket that runs across the engine. So this is the heart of the fuel system. I've got two Walbro high flow inline pumps here that are teed together into one line over here. They've actually both got check valves in them so that no flow will go back. So what I've got here is, this is the return line, comes back into the surge tank up here, and these are all hard lines. I did all these as hard lines, 1/2 inch hard lines from the wing tanks down into screen filter here, so it filters out any crap in the fuel and then fills up this fuel tank. The other tank is here, so this is the passenger side wing tank, comes down, same again into the filter and then fills into the tank. Now this middle one here is a vent, so this, you need to vent that tank here, otherwise you won't fill this tank, it'll always have a pocket of air in there. So that vent line goes all the way up and back to the passenger side wing tank as a vent to the highest point. This tank is also essentially a gascolator. If you can see there, the fuel pickup is higher than the bottom of the tank, so any sediment, water, anything like that will actually settle at the bottom of this tank. And underneath here I've got a drain valve which I can test before flight to see if there's any water in the tank. And then I go straight back into hard fuel lines. So basically the whole fuel system is hard aluminium fuel lines with a rubber connection just for flex and vibration. And then what I've done is I've actually brought these fuel lines out under the belly of the plane, and they go all the way along. I've got one each side, and I'll get a shot down here. So they go down under the belly of the plane and all the way up to the front. Now the reason I did that is a couple of reasons. I didn't want high pressure fuel lines inside the cabin. And the second reason is, when you're running a tank like this, those pumps put out a bit of heat, plus you've got fuel running across the top of the engine, which is also collecting heat. So if these were all covered, what's going to happen is you've got constant circulation of fuel with a fuel injection system. You're going to heat that tank up. So the second reason I put them on the outside is it's airflow across them. You get a bit of heat transfer as well. So cool air on the outside on these aluminium tubes actually cools this fuel going back to the returning line in the tank. It works really well. I haven't actually had any issues with temperature on this. I've been monitoring it through the flights, and the temperature in the fuel is no issue whatsoever. While we're in here, this is just all the controls for the ailerons, flaps. There's the flap motor in here, and there's a flap sensor. I've got an automatic flap positioning switch, which I just push a button and flaps go to the predetermined position that I want. This is the actual radiator in here. So it's right in underneath the belly. In there. The thing you got to think about with your radiator as well, you need a small intake and a large exhaust area. This is a high pressure air in. You need a low pressure area underneath. What these louvers do is, as the airflow hits these louvers when you're in flight, it actually creates turbulence, which is the low area, and sucks the air through the radiator. If you don't have this, what you get is the pressure on the top and the bottom equalise themselves, and you won't get any airflow through your radiator, or proper airflow through your radiator, and you'll have cooling issues. Oil cooler underneath the gearbox. That's just a standard 10-row oil cooler. Oil temps are always in the green. I never have any issues with oil temps. What I've got for the intake here is I've gone a K&N air filter, air temp sensor in through here, and then your intake runs through into your throttle body. I'm actually going to modify it and delete this tube altogether, because it's something that just doesn't need to be there. What I could do is actually make a mount here where I can actually have the air filter and everything mounted here straight on the throttle body. Hopefully that will actually give me a little bit more airflow, because it'll be a fair bit of turbulence through this hose because it's rough on the inside. This here is an SP4 gearbox. Complete adapter, bolts onto a bell housing. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, and the gearbox is actually good for over 200 horsepower. And right inside here it's got your rubber torsional dampeners to take out any torsional vibration that your engine puts out. Starter motor's an original starter motor, which is an original manual flywheel. What you want to really look at when you're doing an installation like this is you're going to need a minimum of 6 kilos of flywheel weight. Downside is the weight, but the upside is you'll get a smoother running engine. It will put less pressure on your rubber dampen down here. Previous engine and aircraft I built had a similar setup, but I had a super lightweight, flexible flywheel, and what I was finding is it was actually chewing out a rubber donut in there. Too much torsional vibration through the engine. I probably only got 100 hours before I had to replace the rubber dampener. So with the additional flywheel weight, you get a smoother idle, and you also get less torsional vibrations through your gearbox as well. The exhaust is a super high flow exhaust. I've made this up with 1.25" runners going into a 2.5" pipe. I put these spring slip joints through. Goes into this T-merge collector here, but it was just made up out of 2 right angle bends. This here is the wideband O2 sensor that I've got here, which goes into the SDS controller, which tells me air fuel ratios of the engine in real time. So then I've just got the exhaust running out down the side and into a hot dog muffler there. And what I did is I actually extended the exhaust, because I don't have, this exhaust is high flow, no baffles whatsoever. It is quite loud without the hot dog muffler. So with this hot dog muffler and that extended tube, it's basically a tuned length pipe, which cuts down the noise. I think it's about 60 decibels, 55, 60 decibels in the cabin at cruise power, so it's really quiet now in the cabin. I originally didn't have this high flow merge. I had it into a baffled exhaust system with a pipe coming out the side. Once I changed it to this, I actually picked up a fair bit more horsepower and had to put 3 degrees pitch on the prop just to compensate the additional power that I got out of the high flow exhaust. So basically everything on this has been custom made. I've had to custom make the engine mount as well to suit this application. It's It's a 6-point engine mount, so I've got 6 rubber mounts, or they're actually nolithane bushes mounting the engine. As you can see, there's one here, a couple of bushes either side, and a bolt through the center. So I've got 2 at the top of the engine. I made up a bracket to bolt down to the engine so that they can mount on there nice and solid. And I've also got a bed mount with bushes under in here. It's hard to see, but I've got nolithane bushes in there, top and bottom. Take out any vibration, they actually work really well. And I've also put this here, which is just a heat shield plate, just to shield the nolithane bushes from the exhaust, because the exhaust is right down through here. The other mod here is just this can here. It's got a K&N filter on the top. It's purely just a lightweight bottle, and all it's doing is stopping any oil residue that comes out of the top of the gearbox. It's basically the gearbox vent. What can normally happen is you can get oil residue and it just makes a mess on your engine. So I've got this running down into here, can catch any overflow oil residue and still vent out through that filter there, so it keeps it nice and clean as well. Thanks for watching, and if you've got any questions, let me know. And next video, I'm actually going to do a video on VG installations on the Cruzer wing. The improvements that I've got from the VGs and stall speeds and etc.
Yeah.